This Grammar Point video will address types of sentences. There are 4 types of sentences depending on the number and type of clause. The types of sentences are simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. However, to understand the types of sentences, you must first understand the 2 types of clauses. So let's quickly review clauses. There are 2 types of clauses, independent and dependent. An independent clause has a subject, a verb, and a complete thought. For example, the altimeter setting is 29.92 inches of mercury. The dominant sequence of elements is S, V, O. The subject, S, is the word setting. The verb V is the word is. And the object O is 29.92 inches of mercury, which completes the sentence S plus V plus O. The sentence has a complete thought. A dependent clause also has a subject and a verb, but it does not have a complete thought. There is no complete thought because a dependent clause begins with a subordinating conjunction or relative pronoun. For an example, the sentence, because 29.9 inches of mercury is standard atmospheric pressure, has a subject and a verb. However, the subordinating conjunction because creates an incomplete sentence. A subordinating conjunction connects 2 ideas in a sentence. The dependent clause is one idea, and the independent clause is the other idea. Therefore, a dependent clause must be connected to an independent clause to make sense. A simple sentence has one independent clause. For an example, the altimeter setting is 29.9 inches of mercury. Most simple sentences have a subject, plus a verb, plus an object. But a simple sentence could simply be a subject and a verb, like the sentence, the altimeter works. A simple sentence can also have compound elements, and it is still a simple sentence. Many students believe simple sentences are short, but that is an incorrect assumption. For an example, a sentence with a compound subject is, the altimeter and vertical speed indicator calculate variations in atmospheric pressure. The dominant sequence, which is also called linguistic typology, is subject 1 plus subject 2 plus verb plus object. An example of a simple sentence with a compound verb would be, the altimeter calculates and displays variations in atmospheric pressure. The words calculates and displays are compound verbs in a simple sentence. The linguistic typology is S plus V1 plus V2 plus O. An example of a simple sentence with a compound direct object would be, the altimeter calculates altitude and atmospheric pressure. Again, the dominant sequence would be S plus V plus O1 plus O2. Finally, a simple sentence can have a compound subject, verb, and direct object. For an example, the altimeter and vertical speed indicator, VSI, calculate and display altitude and atmospheric pressure changes. The sentence has a compound subject, a compound verb, and a compound object. The next type of sentence is compound sentence. A compound sentence has two independent clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction, conjunctive adverb, or semicolon. Coordinating conjunctions are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. They are also called fanboys. Conjunctive adverbs are used in more formal writing to join sentences. Examples of conjunctive adverbs are therefore, however, furthermore, and meanwhile. A more complete list of conjunctive adverbs is in your textbook or on the internet. Finally, a simple semicolon can be used to create a compound sentence, but the sentences must be closely related, and it should not be used continuously when writing a paragraph or essay. In other words, it does not replace a period. The dominant punctuation for compound sentences is to use a comma before the coordinating conjunction, a semicolon before a conjunctive adverb, followed by a comma, and obviously a semicolon is the only punctuation to connect closely related sentences. For example, the sentence, the altimeter displays altitude, comma, but the vertical speed indicator, VSI, displays rate of climb, connects two independent clauses with the coordinating conjunction, but. The second example connects two sentences with the conjunctive adverb, however, and the sentence utilizes the correct punctuation, a semicolon before, however, and a comma after. The third example connects two sentences with a semicolon, but both sentences are closely related. The next sentence type is a complex sentence. And a complex sentence has one dependent clause joined to an independent clause. Remember that a dependent clause begins with a subordinating conjunction or a relative pronoun. Here is a list of some common subordinating conjunctions and relative pronouns. Additional subordinating conjunctions are in your textbook or on the internet. An example of a complex sentence with a subordinated conjunction is the altimeter setting is 29.92 inches of mercury because standard atmospheric pressure is 29.92. In the next example, we move the dependent clause to the beginning of the sentence. Because standard atmospheric pressure is 29.92 inches of mercury, the altimeter setting is 29.92. If the dependent clause is at the beginning of the sentence, then you must add a comma at the end of the dependent clause. An example of a complex sentence with a relative pronoun is many accidents are the result of pilots who lack the necessary skills to fly in instrument meteorological conditions, IMC. The relative pronoun who begins the essential dependent clause. Essential dependent clauses add information to ambiguous nouns. It tells the reader who or which of the pilots can cause many accidents. The next example of a complex sentence with a relative pronoun is Captain Sully Sullenberger, who has years of flight experience, landed an Airbus 320 in the Hudson River. Now, the relative pronoun who begins the non-essential dependent clause. Non-essential dependent clauses add information to specific proper nouns. The information is interesting, but it is not necessary. With non-essential dependent clauses, you must offset the clause with commas. The last type is a compound complex sentence. A compound complex sentence has two independent clauses joined to one or more dependent clauses. For an example, when an airplane flies above 18,000 feet MSL, mean sea level, the pilot must adjust the altimeter setting to 29.92 inches of mercury so the aircraft can fly at the correct assigned altitude. The dependent clause in the first sentence begins with when, and it is attached to an independent clause, which indicates a complex sentence. However, the complex sentence is connected to a simple sentence with the coordinating conjunction so. Now, the sentence structure is a compound complex sentence. You should note the comma after the dependent clause and before the coordinating conjunction. Here are more examples of compound complex sentences utilizing relative pronouns, conjunctive adverbs, and semicolons. In the first sentence, there is a non-essential dependent clause, which begins and ends with commas. The sentence also uses a conjunctive adverb to connect the two sentences. In the second sentence, there are two essential dependent clauses that begin with the relative pronouns who. Both dependent clauses add important information to ambiguous nouns, such as pilots and people. The two sentences are closely related, so a semicolon is used to connect the two sentences. Which of the pilots? Which?